um, video of this on our YouTube site, which is going to make it easier to distribute to people who weren't invited to this meeting. So we are now recording. Perfect. Okay, so once again, everybody's on mute. We have probably going to get up to about 40 people on this webinar, and it tends to work a lot better when we keep everybody on mute. But the chat box is there for you. Please go ahead if you as we get going here, ask as many questions as you want via the chat. We are going to pause regularly throughout and answer questions as best we can. So we're here this morning. So first, let me introduce myself. I'm Rich Kennedy. I'm the Director of Handicap and Membership Services with New Jersey State Golf. I am in my 23rd year in this position. And this morning, we are going to be presenting the World Handicap System Rules of Handicapping. This is a revised Rules of Handicapping this year, and some really neat new aspects to it that I'm excited to present to you all today. The other part of a revision of the World Handicap System is a recertification process. So some of you, a lot of you on this call are going to be taking a quiz after the webinar today, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later and how you're going to get the quiz and all of that. Some of you are golfers, you're members. We're going to give you an opportunity to take a 15-question quiz. However, you're not you taking a quiz will not certify your club, but it'll be fun for you. So again, excited. We got some new information for you. This is always good. It's always good to review the World Handicap System stuff in preparation for a golf season. So this is going to be a lot of fun. And with that, I am going to get started. So let's start with some of the big changes that we mentioned the onset that are exciting. So scores used when holes not played, treatment of 9-hole scores, guidance on allowances. There's some new handicap review reporting tools, and there's a new minimum length of a golf course for a course and slope rating. So let's talk about the purpose, talk a little bit about authorization and obtaining a handicap index. So we'd like to start with just kind of the structure of governance, just to give you a feel for the authority and the pecking order in a way. Similar to the rules of golf, similar to the rules of amateur status, equipment, the World Handicap System. It starts at the top with the USGA and the RNA. The World Handicap System is exactly what you're seeing right now. It's a handicap system for the entire world. And the goal is to enhance the enjoyment of the game, and give as many golfers as possible an opportunity to obtain a handicap and use their handicap in any course, compete in competitions, or on a casual basis with anybody on a fair and equitable basis. This is achieved by establishing a course and slope rating for each set of tees. So that standard of a course and slope rating, this is what makes the handicap system work, the ability to measure the difficulty of golf courses, the ability to convert handicap indexes to a course handicap and then a playing handicap so we can compete. We're now assessing the impact of playing conditions on each day. So we're getting even more equitable with that aspect of it. We're limiting maximum hole scores for handicap purposes. That's at net double bogey. It's going to be coming up more again this morning. And we're ensuring that each handicap index is calculated consistently, revised at the end of the day. And we're conducting a review, handicap review on a regular basis. Allied Golf Association, so with regard to course rating, we're required to issue a course rating and slope rating for both men and women for all tees up to 6,000 yards. So this is an ongoing process. Definitely something to note for my my club staff attendees this morning. We want to have a rating, a men's and women's rating for all tees. Your shorter tees, your longer tees, so that when a male or female is playing a given tee on any given day, they can post that score. So if there are unrated tees, let us know. So who are the stakeholders in all of this? So we have the USGA and the RNA. We talked about that. The Regional Golf Association, the AGA, the Allied Golf Association, that's New Jersey State Golf. That's also the Metropolitan Golf Association of Philadelphia, if you're familiar with those organizations. There's the USGA, and then there's at the club level, it's the golf club, handicap committee, and then there's obviously the players. So all of these organizations, all of us have a role in making sure that the rules are being implemented and administered properly. So in order to obtain a handicap in accordance with the rules of handicapping, a player must be a member of an authorized golf club that is affiliated with an AGA. By returning a score for the purpose of obtaining or maintaining a handicap, the player acknowledges that the use of their scoring record will be available for peer review purposes. So their scores will be viewable either on the mobile app or on gin.com by fellow members of their club. Player must designate one golf club as their home club to be responsible for maintaining the handicap index. They can have multiple clubs, but they have to designate one club to be the home club. The home club, whatever club is designated, they are responsible for modifying a handicap index if that is required. Questions so far? And I'm going to introduce Will Luke with New Jersey State Golf. Will is going to be monitoring the Q&A in the comments. And Will, if you can unmute yourself, let me know if there's any questions so far.
Yep. Hey, Rich, can you hear me?
I got you.
Yep. No questions so far, but I'll keep monitoring the chat in case there's any that pop up.
Perfect. Thank you all. Section 2. Acceptable scores for handicap purposes. So the principle of the rule is the scores a player submits for handicap purposes are at the core of the calculation of their handicap index. This rule covers the conditions a score must satisfy for it to be acceptable for handicap purposes, providing confidence that it will produce a reasonable evidence of the player's ability and ultimately a handicap index as reflective of demonstrated ability. So let's look at some acceptable scores. Scores in authorized play. Scores in the company of at least one person. So that was new back in 2019. That is still a core component of acceptable scores. You can't post scores for rounds played alone. You do need somebody out there with you. Scores played by the rules of golf. Scores on a golf course with a current course and slope rating. So in order to post, that golf course has to have a course and slope rating, which again, going back to what we talked about, we want women to be able to, that are playing a 6,200 yard, 6,400 yard course, potentially longer, to have a rating there to post to. And we're getting close to having all those tees rated. And then lastly, during an active season. So April 1st in New Jersey is the first day to post scores. So, you know, there's some really nice days for golf, ahead of us today included. And people are going to feel pretty good about the conditions of the course, and they're going to want to post, but right now, they cannot post a score. We're waiting until April 1st to start posting scores in New Jersey. So let's talk about unacceptable scores. So no post if you're being coached, if you're playing and being coached. No posting if you're using a non-conforming club or equipment. No posting if you're in a competition that's restricting the number of clubs to use. Ironman competitions, that kind of thing. No posting when a score cannot be verified by another person. Again, that's you can't post if you're playing a round of golf by yourself. No posting if you don't meet the required number of holes, and that's an important change that we're going to address in the coming slides. And no posting when a player does not play their own ball, and the best example of that is a scramble format or an alternate shot format event. So some guidance for committees on this. There are situations where a player may be disqualified from a competition for a breach of rules of golf, but no significant scoring advantage had been gained. So the score, even though the golfer was disqualified, the score in some cases can be acceptable for handicap purposes. The example bullet pointed here is a player didn't sign their scorecard. That obviously has no impact on the play on the course, just a tough luck mistake that the player made that disqualified the player from the event. However, that score should be posted. The player may have proceeded under an alternative option that on the course and was disqualified for it for relief. But there's still this is still a circumstance where it's really not impacting the overall round. And we can go ahead and post that score. And in other instances where a player may have used a distance measuring device, when there's a local rule that prohibited it, that score can then be posted. Where a player has breached the rules of golf and general play and knowingly failed to apply the correct penalty, the score should not generally be accepted for handicap purposes. However, depending on the circumstances, the committee has the discretion to produce an acceptable score by recording the actual score for that hole, adjusting that score where the breach was made using net double bogey, or applying a score of net par. So the minimum number of holes played. So this is a great slide. And if you notice on the upper right-hand corner, there's a nice little banner there. Please keep an eye out for that change for 24. So whenever there's something new, that you're going to see that slide. So if you're spacing out and you think, oh, I know this, this is all the same old, keep an eye on that. So if you see that, then get out of your space world and pay attention, because it's important that you note these new changes. And the first of which that we're going to discuss is 9-hole scores. There's several changes, but the first change is that in order to post a 9-hole score, you have to play 9 holes. So it used to be you can play 7 or 8 holes and you can post that score using a net par for holes not played. That is not the case anymore. So you have to, in order to post a 9-hole score, you have to play 9 holes. And in order to post an 18-hole score, you have to play at least 10 holes. And anywhere between 10 and 17 holes, those scores have to be posted hole by hole. And we're going to talk about expected score and why that matters. Why posting hole by hole really matters for this expected score to work the way it's supposed to work. So important change there. So let's move on to adjustment of hole scores. Again, principle of this rule is a score for handicap purposes should not be overly influenced by 1 or 2 bad holes, those blow-up holes. and are not reflective of a player's demonstrated ability. In addition, incomplete scores and/or scores where the player did not hole out in every hole can provide reasonable evidence of the player's ability and can be used for handicap purposes. So this is where we're not holing out because my partner's in for a better score or I've lost a hole. So we're taking our most likely score. So rule 3, we're going to talk about all of this, most likely score and more. So first, let's talk about the maximum score for handicap purposes. So this is something just to know for your brand new golfers. What's my maximum score? I don't have a handicap, so what I can't take net double bogey. I don't have a handicap. So par plus 5. That's the example here is the score of a 12 on hole 6 for John Smith. He takes a 10. So that was a par 5. He's going to add 5 more shots. He takes a 10. That's his max score. So it's really important to note for new golfers, golfers just starting off with their handicap. Moving on to a maximum score for a golfer with a handicap. So if you have a handicap, that's where the net double bogey comes into play. So we're going to take double bogey on the hole. So if it's a par 5, it's a 7. If we're getting strokes in that hole, we're going to add that stroke. And in this particular case, we're taking an 8 for this golfer. Again, just make sure those bad holes where you really struggle don't overly impact your scoring ability. So we have another example here. John Smith has a course handicap of 16. So this means he's getting a stroke on 1 through 16 handicap stroke holes. You see the rankings on the scorecard to the right. On the 17th hole where he receives a stroke, his gross score of 9 would be reduced to 7. As a result, his gross score of 88 is reduced to an adjusted score of 86 for handicap purposes. So if he was playing in a competition, it's still, that 88 is still going to be recorded for the purpose of the competition, but for the purpose of his handicap and posting, we adjusted down to 86 because he was adjusted on hole 17 from a 9 to a 7. Helpful tips for net double bogey. Encourage clubs to post hole by hole using the app. If you're on their mobile app, the app knows what the player's course handicap is. So if they post hole by hole, whatever that score is, it'll be automatically adjusted. When a hole is not played. So again, you got the banner, red banner, change for 24. So clue in. Score from an incomplete round or when one or more holes have not been played may only be used for handicap purposes if, among other things, the round has been played over at least a minimum of holes required for either 9 holes or an 18 hole, 10 to 17 holes to be acceptable. The reason for not completing the round and the reason for not completing the round was valid. So some valid reasons for not finishing. Darkness, obviously. Bad weather, we've all been there. Injury, illness, that unfortunately that happens. Holes or holes that are declared out of play by the committee or maintenance. So this time of year, this is a time of year where we get that. On April 1, it's early in the season. There may be some maintenance happening on your golf course, and that's going to happen. So that would fall under the category of a hole not played. And a match, this is a question I get all the time, a match finishing before the final hole on the course. So matches might finish on 15, 16, depending on how it goes. How do we post those scores? And the answer is yes. And we're gonna talk more about how that works. That has changed. We're not taking holes not played net par anymore. We're doing this differently. So before we get to that, some invalid reasons might include whether does not prevent the continuation of play, not playing a particular hole to avoid a high score, not playing the final holes on a course in order to avoid submitting a high score or a low score, or any other situation that the committee that decides is unreasonable. So this is the big change right here that's going to be a reoccurring theme. So when the committee determines that one or more holes has not been played for a valid reason, an 18-hole score differential will be created using their expected score. So the importance of the hole-by-hole scores is big because we're going to, that anywhere between 10 and 17 holes, whatever the number is that were completed, the holes not played are then going to be recalculated into a differential that adds on to the holes that were played. So we're using the handicap index to get to that differential, and we're using the number of holes that were not played to get to that differential number. And this is referred to in the rules of handicapping as the expected score. In this, the player will be required to post their hole by hole when 10 to 17 holes are played. So the appropriate score differential can be calculated from the holes that were played to combine the expected score for the number of holes not played. These values are added to determine the 18-hole score differential. In limited circumstances, we can use the old system. A score of net par can be used in limited circumstances, but in almost all cases, we are going to be deferring to this expected score. Again, very important. If we're going to do this, the golfer does have to post hole by hole. And this expected score is determined by the handicap index of the golfer. And nothing, the index of the golfer and the holes that are still left to be played that are not played. And that's it. So it keeps it very standard. So here's an example. We have 16 holes played, 17 and 18 not played. Create an 18-hole score differential. We split the round into holes played and holes not played. So we have so in this, we have a 16-hole differential from the holes played, and we're going to add that to the expected score differential for the 2 holes not played. We calculate a course rating for 16 holes played, which includes the actual 9-hole rating plus a rating value for the 7 holes played. So you see this in action right now. You have 36.0, and the rating value for the 7 holes not played, 27.9. So we have created a 6, and this is happening automatically, by the way. This is not something that your committee has to do or anything. That this happens using your calculation service, GIN. And then we determine a slope rating of the 16 holes played, 125. And then we get into the differential formula, 113 divided by the slope, the adjusted score, minus the course rating for the holes played, gives us that 16-hole differential. So the adjusted score, that's 78. We had a 78 for the 16 holes played. We subtract that by the course rating, the 16-hole course rating, gives us that 16-hole score differential. Jane's handicap index of 16.0 is then used. That's what determines her expected score differential. The result is 2.12. That 2.12 is added to the 16-hole differential. And then we have our 18-hole score differential. Remember, the expected score is based on the average score differential of a player with a given handicap index and a normal distribution of scores. So it is not specific to each player. So it's really just looking at the index and then creating a differential for the holes not played using the index. And that's it. Course rating is based on the information known about the holes played. That's something that we do, on a cyclical basis for all of our member courses. We provide that course and slope rating, so that's what is used. Slope rating for the holes played is calculated using weighted average of the slope rating of the full 9 that was played, and slope rating in a number of holes played on that 9 was not completed. In the Jane Smith example, the front 9 slope rating was 125 and the back 9 slope rating was 126. This produced a slope rating of 125 if you average them together, which rounded to 125 for handicap purposes. When between 10 and 17 holes are played, the scoring record will display the following. So this is important to note, and it should provide some comfort because it's new, and I'm sure you're looking at this now and you're maybe scratching your head a little bit about how this change is going to work and how you're going to explain this to members at your club. Well, what is displayed here explains a lot. So we have the score listed, and it's highlighted in yellow, and you see the 78. So that 78 is the score for 16 holes. This golfer, if you look at the rest of Jane's scoring record, she hasn't shot anything close to a 78, but the 16 is in parentheses. So that 16 identifies that, okay, all right, that's a 78 for 16 holes. And then we move on. It gives you the course and slope rating, and then it gives you the differential that's being used for the handicap calculation. That differential is the 16-hole differential plus the 2.12, the 2-hole differential that was calculated using Jane's handicap index. So that 16 holes, that's 16 in parentheses. I think that's going to help us all a whole lot when we're communicating to golfers and kind of explaining what actually happened when they played 15 holes or 14 holes or 16 holes and how this all was calculated. So what are the benefits of this? It's consistent. You're going to see a consistency of this throughout. And again, that's why it just uses the player's handicap index and the hole is not played. That's a consistent number for anybody who's playing around a golf and it ends up playing somewhere between 10 and 17 rounds. So there's consistency there. There's flexibility. So you can play 11 holes. Now you can play 10 holes and get an 18-hole differential, where before you could only post a 9-hole score if you only played up to 11 or 12 holes. You had to play 13 holes to get that 18-hole score. So now you get a full 18-hole differential impact in your handicap index. And it's modern. It's it's a new approach to this, and it's a more equitable approach. And I will say this, and I may repeat myself later, but if you remember how the 9-hole score calculation was done, it was a combination of 2 9s. And there was a trend that occurred where scores were lower than usual when golfers combined 2 9s. And I use myself as an example. The first time I ever broke 80 was, I didn't really break 80. I had 2 9-hole scores, a 38 and a 40 that combined. And next thing you know, I had a 78, my scoring record, and I had never broken 80 for an 18-hole round. So it did produce scores that were unusually low and not fully representative of the golfer's ability. And that was a concern by World Handicap System, USGA, R&A. And this is the way forward to correct that concern. Again, these are just some more examples of when a hole might not be completed. So let's go back to that. So the result of the hole has been decided, conceded in match play, player's partner's better score. And what do we do in these cases? So we're still, and you notice that the the red banner is not here. We're still using most likely score. So we're using that same procedure in place, where if we pick up on a hole, and it's a good thing to do, especially for pace of play, to move things along, where, hey, you're in for a birdie, I'm putting for a bogey, I pick up, and I'm going to take my most likely score. So this is a neat little slide. It's going to kind of provide some guidance as to what the proper number of strokes to take in these various circumstances. So here we are. We have a ball in the green within 5 feet. The recommendation is to add 1 stroke. We're gonna give you that putt. When we get out of 5 feet, now we're talking about 2, possibly 3 additional strokes. You want to look at the difficulty of the green and what's going on. Are you off the green in that 5 to 20 yards? Is it a chip and 2 putts? What's the likelihood of getting up and down in 2, and all of that. So we're using 2 or possibly 3 additional strokes. And then when we're really outside of the green, we're talking about adding 3, a chip onto the green, a 2 putt, or possibly even a 4, depending on the circumstance. So some nice guidelines, Rule 3-3.3. Definitely refer to that as these questions come up. And Will, any questions so far?
Yep. So we do have one question. It was, does playing with a caddy constitute as a postable round?
Yes. If you have a caddy with you, you can post your score.
That's the only question we've had so far.
Nice. That's a great question. All right, let's talk about submitting scores. So Rule 4 covers the process of submitting acceptable scores for handicap purposes, to obtain a handicap index, and to maintain and establish a handicap index. Timely submission of scores by a player or anyone else responsible or authorized to submit scores on their behalf allows for the responsive updates and provides a real-time measure of the player's golfing ability. This rule outlines the information that players are required to submit for acceptable scores and how these scores can be verified. So, very important thing. We've talked about this back in 2020 when the World Handicap System came out, is because of some of the big changes, daily revisions, playing condition calculation. We really need those scores to get posted after golfers play. So that's something you want to definitely encourage your members to do. And let's talk a little bit more about it. So a score posted into a player's scoring record must be an acceptable score, as we discussed. Recorded in accurate chronological order, even if the score is posted on a day later than the day the round was played. Upon posting a score, a player must ensure the following information is provided for inclusion in their scoring record: the date of the round, course, and slope rating. So a lot of that's taken care of, obviously, using the mobile app. You are required to, before you post that score, enter the date, enter the tee you played, and all of that. Who can post the score? So the player obviously can post their score after a round. Sometimes it is the handicap committee or the committee in charge of a competition. I know for a lot of our events, for our qualifiers, for our golf days, we go ahead and post the score using our tournament management program. And then you can have, like, people you play with. You may want to post scores for the group. That happens a lot. That's fine. But it's kind of like you're signing off on somebody else that posting your score after you play, and that's totally fine. So the time frame for posting the score, we want you to post right after you play or the same day, and it's important. If you don't post after you play, your handicap index won't be updated in time for the revision. The score will not be included in the daily playing conditions calculation. We'll talk more about the playing condition calculation on another slide. So I'm going to move on to just continue this with certification of scores. A player, someone authorized to player must post a score as soon as possible after completion of a round and before midnight. Again, the handicap committee should ensure a submitted score is posted to a player's scoring record as soon as possible. What happens when we do this is peer review works better. People in that group, I always like to use the example of, a match, or if I lost, $20 to a friend of mine who played great, I want to make sure he posts that score because I might have been giving him a bunch of shots that allowed for him to beat me. So if they play great, I want that score to go in. I'm going to check that score the next day. So make sure, again, post that score after you play. Rule 4.5. Excuse me. So a number of scores for initial handicap index. So for golfers that are just starting off with a handicap index, and again, there's no changes here. So we need 54 holes played. 54 holes must be played. It can be any combination of 9 and 18 hole rounds. There's no time limit on posting these scores, and they may be backdated. So make sure if you're getting somebody new into finally posting scores and establishing a handicap index, make sure you let them know if they have old scores, in-season scores, to go ahead and post those scores and do their best to get the date right for that chronological order, but try to get those scores in. And also, as they're starting to play and post, have them start getting used to posting hole by hole. Questions?
No questions so far, Rich.
Okay, gonna keep plugging away here. Section 3. Handicap index calculation. Players' handicap index should represent their demonstrated ability and, where appropriate, be responsive to scores that are inconsistent with their demonstrated ability. Rule 5 covers the process of calculating a handicap index and incorporates the safeguards needed to help ensure that a player's handicap index remains reflective of their ability and that equity is retained for all golfers. So this is the formula for calculating a score differential. We use the 113 as a USGA, or it's not necessarily USGA standard slope anymore. It's just a standard slope divided by the actual slope rating of the golf course. And then we have the adjusted score, which is subtracted by the course rating. And then if there's any PCC adjustments playing condition calculation. So here's an example of a score differential calculation using an adjusted score of 85, slope rating of 117. So we have that 113 divided by 117, multiplied times 85 minus 68.7. There's no PCC adjustment, so we end up with a score differential of 15.7. For 9-hole, when a player posts a 9-hole score differential will be calculated for the 9 holes played, and that number will be combined with an expected score based on the player's handicap index to create an 18-hole differential. So again, we have that red banner, change for 24, and we have that new term, expected score. Expected score is a score a player is expected to achieve over a specified number of holes on a course of standard difficulty. It is calculated using a player's handicap index and attributes a numerical value against any hole or holes not played during the round. Remember, the expected score is based on the average score differential of a player with a given handicap index and a normal distribution of scores. So it is not specific to each player. So we have our example here at Sunnyside Golf Club. We got John Smith again. His handicap index is 10.0. He's playing the bronze tees, and the front nine ratings are 36.0, 125. We got a scorecard. Looks like he shot a 42 for 9. So we get that 9-hole differential. All right, that's easy. 135. That's the same calculation that it's always been. No PCC adjustment. So we have our 9-hole differential. And then we get an 18-hole score differential calculated by combining the 9-hole score differential from the 9 holes played with the expected score differential for the hole or holes not played, calculated based on a given handicap index in a course of standard difficulty. So front 9 differential 5.42, and using 10.0 and 9 holes not played, we develop an expected differential of 6.38. They're added together, and we end up with an 18-hole score differential of 11.8. Example number 2. Front 9, silver tees, 36.0, 125. We have, again, adjusted gross score 42. Is that 5.42 differential? So here we have players with different indexes. Same score, same front 9 score, but different index. So it's really that the expected score differential on the back 9 really just depends on the golfer's index and nothing else. So that's important to understand. So player A has an 18-hole score differential at 8.7. Player B with a 10.0, 18-hole score differential 11.8. Player C, 16.0, 18-hole score differential 14.9. So same score, just different handicap index, and it's just that handicap index alone that determines what that back 9 expected score differential is. Hopefully that's sinking in. Here's some more examples. We have player A with a score of 47, 17.1 index, 21.5. Player B also shoots. I don't know why it's the same. Player B, same thing, 17.1, 18-hole score differential, 21.5. So they're the same. Player C shot 49, and his 9-hole excuse me, his 18-hole differential is 23.4. And it's only went up because of the front 9. He shot 49. So the only reason why he's 23.4 is because his 9-hole differential was higher on the front. But his back 9 differential is the same as player A, player B, and player C because they have the same index. So it just really depends on the handicap index as to what those expected score differentials are going to be. And that's for either the full back 9 or for holes not played. Now, one thing to add with the front with 9-hole scores, you don't necessarily have to post hole by hole to make this work. You do have to post hole by hole to make it work for 10 to 17 holes played. But for 9-hole scores, you will get an expected back 9 differential if you just post a 9-hole score. And again, here's some highlights. Highlighted scores in your score history. And so they're marked with N. They show the 9-hole score, but it is an 18-hole score differential. So all 9-hole scores from now on will be marked with N, but they will result in 18-hole score differentials that will be, factored in to your 20 score history, your 8 of 20 score calculation. So just take note of this, and there will be questions, but I think once golfers get used to this, they're really going to like it. It directly impacts. Here are the benefits. So again, there's that consistency. It's really, there's a standard, right? There's a standard. There's the handicap index and whatever, and the back nine. That's it. That's what determines that expected score differential on it for everybody. So there's that standard. There's that equitability with that standard. The responsiveness. Now those rounds mean something. When you go play 9 holes after work, you get a little more impact on your handicap index. There's a little more, I don't know if satisfaction is the word, but I think it's going to feel better for the golfer knowing that 9 that they just played was not just sitting there waiting for another 9 to then impact your handicap index. It's going to impact it right away. And if you're playing well, and you're playing a lot of 9-hole golf, that's important. More equitability, without question. And we talked about that earlier. The combination of 9s resulting in scores that are lower, not fully representative of that player's scoring ability, making it more equitable. And again, more inclusive, just more open to those types of golfers that are playing 9-hole rounds a lot, and giving them a more valid handicap for when they compete, friends, tournaments. They're able to compete with a more equitable handicap going forward because of this change. So no change here. We're still using the 8 of 20 scores to calculate a handicap index. So your last 20 scores, your most recent 20 scores, and we're taking the 8 lowest differentials. If you haven't quite gotten to 20 scores, this chart shows you how or what scores are going to be used to create your index. And I love the change back in 2020 where those adjustments, when you've only played 3 or 4 or 6 rounds, those minus adjustments I think are really important, because I think we all saw some strange handicaps from golfers early on that may not have been as reflective of their ability, and this kind of corrects that. So again, we're taking that average of the best 8 of your last 20 scores. Compute the difference between the average of the low 8 score differentials and the low handicap index to determine if a cap is applied. We are going to talk about caps on a future slide here, but we're still just talking about the calculation. So here are all those 8 differentials that add up to 79.2, divided by 8, and we end up with a handicap index of 9.9. Score history, if you haven't seen it before, I'm sure most of you have. Scores that are being used for the calculation are always starred in your score history. The maximum handicap index for all players is 54.0. So again, that number 54. So as you're just starting off, you need to play at least 54 holes to get a handicap index. And then from there, no one will have a handicap index higher than 54.0. So this is one of the nice change in 2020. Definitely makes having it more inclusive to having a handicap index for all skill levels. The frequency of revisions. So anytime you post, you get your handicap index is revised that night. Again, we want to post scores on the same day. So we get that revision and we allow for the playing calculation to be carried out correctly, and it ensures that scores are there for peer review. Impact of daily revisions. So very important that we have daily revisions. I think there's been a great change in the handicap system. However, if you're conducting a multi-round competition over consecutive days, it is recommended that the handicap index used at the start of the competition is used for all rounds. So for my event management, my tournament people out there, that's a good recommendation for you. Just lock in those handicap indexes for your tournament, and that is what it is for the remainder of those rounds. You don't have to worry about adjusting handicaps every day of your tournament. Score should be posted on the day of play. Again, by the committee or player. The committee may adjust playing handicap index before or between rounds at a competition. So this is something to note and to think about. All right, so you're locking in handicaps for your 2-day, 3-day event, but you have golfers that play great. Maybe a guest that hadn't had a lot of information on that guest coming into the event. Their handicap index was a 20, and they went out and played their first round like they were a 5. You want to have that ability to adjust the handicap index in between rounds. I would set yourself up to be able to do this when running your tournaments, and make sure you communicate that in some kind of language on your information sheet, just so golfers know that this possibility is there. So when you do it, there's just less questioning as to why you did it. So aging of scores, just note that a score, even if it's from 2019, if it's still in that golfer's 20 score history, most recent scores, it's still going to be used to calculate that golfer's handicap index. So it's really just about the most recent 20 scores. So Rule 5.6, playing conditions calculation. So no red banner, no changes. This rule is still in place. We're still being operated the way in which it was implemented. So there's still a minimum of 8 scores that need to be posted on that day. The golfers posting those scores still have to have an handicap index of 36.0 and lower. And it's really about looking at their expected score in relationship to their handicap index. So if significantly fewer players than anticipated attained their expected score, conditions are determined to be harder than normal. If significantly more players than anticipated attain their expected score, conditions are determined to be easier than normal. The adjustments range from -1 to +3, based on the amount needed to move enough players into the expected scoring range, and apply to everyone who posted for a score that day. So again, it really helps if the scores are posted that day. Listen, we have in New Jersey, we have a variety of weather or a variety of factors, weather and factors that can impact how a course plays, whether harder or easier. We have conditions sometimes where it's windy, firm, greens are exceptionally fast, and course can be very hard to score on, and on a given day. And we have conditions that can be soft, the greens are not as fast. Maybe there's not a wind factor, and the course is scoreable. I mean those kinds of things are hard it's hard for course rating to get all that information to factor in those factors. This does it. But it's purely based, it's not, the weather stinks, let's turn on the PCC. It's purely based on the scores that are being posted. And so the impact of the weather on those scores is what we're looking at. We're not looking at the weather per se. Hopefully that is clear to everybody. So let's look at some examples of how PCC can impact the score differential. So here's a case, there's no impact, no PCC. That's that far right, 94 minus 69.4 minus 0. There's our score differential. So now we have a PCC of +2 on that adjusted gross score of 94. So if there's a +2 on the PCC and it's a -2 on the differential, and that score differential ends up becoming lower. So that means so +2 means the course played harder than normal. So that 94, which originally was a 21.2 differential, once we see that PCC, that means, okay, that 94 is a better 94 than normal, than what a regular 94 is. That was a 94 on a day where there were some conditions, some conditions that showed up that made the course harder. So we lowered that differential to reflect that the score of that 94 on a day where the conditions were impactful. Key considerations for the PCC. So this might be a good, if you're doing a screenshot, do a screenshot of this. PCC takes place once at midnight local time each day. Players with a handicap index, again, 36.0 or less. 8 acceptable scores must be posted on a given day. And the more scores that are posted, the better the data is. Again, which is why we want those scores posted that day. PCC adjustment could apply if the course is set up harder or easier than normal, which means it's important to ensure consistent course setup. Okay, so let's talk about that. Your outing, there's your outing tees where you move up the golfers, so the course can get a lot easier. You may want to just make sure you communicate that maybe the set of tees to post to. You may move your white tees all the way up. They may actually not be your white tees. They may be your gold tees. So maybe consider, communicating that to the people playing in your event that, the outing is really clean play from the gold tee today. So those kinds of things to communicate within whoever's playing a course are helpful. A manually entered course and slope ratings result the score not being considered. So if you use that manual option, there's no you're not using a course that those scores won't be considered. I'll just leave it at that. And scores must be posted on the day to be included in the PCC. But if you post the following day and there was a PCC that was implemented, your score will receive that adjustment. Okay, so moving on to low handicap index. So this is again another great change to 2020, and no changes going forward. We're still low index is still very much impactful to a golfer's handicap index. It is the low index of the golfer within a 365-day period. Whenever there's an adjustment possibility for a golfer, the committee has an option to reset the golfer to their low index. But it should always be used when reviewing a golfer's the possibility of a golfer's adjustment. We should always be looking at that low index to see, when they were at that low index point, when they were playing well, and that's going to help you make decisions on how to best adjust a golfer's index if needed. Key messaging for players. Why the 365? Why the 365 days? So it's enough time to consider the memory of a player's demonstrated ability, provides consistent time frame for everyone, rather than count of scores, which would be dependent on frequency of play. It enables a player who performed well in an event to potentially still be impacted in the same event the following year. So the low index plays a big role with regard to the caps, and the caps are the soft cap and the hard cap. This calculation takes place every time your handicap is revised, and it's looking at your current index and comparing that to your low index. And if there is an increase of three strokes on your current index in comparison to your lower index, that soft cap takes form. Soft cap takes whatever amount above 3 strokes and just suppresses it by 50%. If that suppression still results in the handicap index being more than 5 strokes above the low index, that hard cap comes into place. So no golfer within a 365-day period will have a handicap index that increases more than 5 strokes. And the last thing to note here, the handicap committee at the player's home club can override a cap. And this is something that I work with clubs regularly on. It usually relates to an injury or some kind of procedure, health issue, and and so we take those circumstances and make adjustments that make sense given the circumstances that are at hand. So that is something that the handicap committee has jurisdiction over, and those adjustments are good to good to reach out to me on those adjustments, and we can make it happen. So here's an example of kind of the course of a year and when adjustments take place. So here we have the 365, that low index of 20.0. Now we're in mid-February, and we have a soft cap that triggers when a golfer's handicap jumps to 23.0. And then we have a hard cap ceiling that takes place when the golfer's index goes beyond that. So here's a good example of a soft cap. Low index is 10, current is 14. That increase beyond 3 is 1. We suppress that by 50%, and we end up with a 13.5 handicap index. Here's our hard cap example. Again, same. Golfer has a 10.0. Current 8 of 20 is 18, comes out to 18.0. So we're 5 strokes beyond that 3-stroke increase. So we got to suppress that 5, which ends up being 2.5. We still end up, at a 15.5, which is higher than 5 strokes. So we have to hard cap it at 15.0. So messaging for players. It happens automatically. This is not the guy who's just put on a handicap committee that you upset 2 years ago because you won $50 on a Wednesday match, and he thinks you're a sandbagger. This happens automatically, and there's no action people within the club or anybody taking action on this, which is great. It provides equity and ensures. I mean, it should provide comfort to players because it's actually making it's making sure that golfers that maybe were at a certain point with their ability as their handicap index goes up, it doesn't go up rapidly. It slows down the increase of the handicap index, and which is important. So we want to slow down that upward movement, so there's less extreme circumstances where golfers really jump, and next thing you know, they go back to playing like they were when they're a low handicap index, and they end up doing exceptionally well in the tournament. And I'll say this: it's really, it's only extreme circumstances where the cap isn't kind of really in line with what it should be, and really not impacting the golfer the right way. And a lot of times, it's only when golfers see the cap, they get alarmed, but a lot of times it's really only adjusting their handicap by maybe a few tenths of a point, 1/10 of a point in cases. So it's important to note too, like when they're talking about it, they might be upset about it. Like, let's actually look at the handicap index as to what it was and what it is now, and you'll see that it really has not changed much. So moving on to exceptional score reduction, again, no change. Great adjustment or revision in the 2020 World Handicap System. It really kind of flags those.
Thank you, Reed. Next up, Hall of Fame, K-Mac.
Hold on. Want to mute. So somebody. All right. Hopefully that turns that off. All right. Getting back to exceptional score reduction. So golfer plays 7 strokes better than their handicap index. They get a -1 score reduction. If they play 10 or more strokes better, it's a -2.
They were the 2023 class. And then
K-Mac, if you're out there, mute yourself.
Also telling me, the court requirements are going to have to be followed to the T.
All right, I'm just gonna. All right, great. Apologies. So some examples if an equitable stroke score reduction takes form. You got set score 75. This golfer was a 10.0, score differential 2.9. We're flagging that. That's obviously way better than the score the golfer normally plays. So that score and every score preceded it gets that -1 adjustment. And then as they post and play, those newer scores don't get the adjustment, but all the old scores do hang on to that adjustment. The last thing I will say here, if golfers do get an exceptional score, like if I personally got an equitable score reduction, there would be a big party at my house. That means I played unbelievably well. I've never even come close to playing 7 strokes better than my handicap index. It's very hard to do. So it's great if golfers that do it. God bless you. It's rarely do we hear, unless it was a score posted by mistakes, rarely do we hear any kind of disagreement as to whether the reduction should be in place. Okay, moving on. Still got a lot to go over in within the next 20 minutes here, so we're gonna keep moving here. So let's talk about the course handicap calculation. So again, no changes to the course handicap calculation. We're still using the same approach. The term target score is still used. I know I have one USGA representative on this call today. I would love to see this get in a book at some point. I don't know why they like to keep it outside of the book. So I think it helps explain, you know, the impact of an index, you know, what it does very well. And by talking it in terms of a target score. So your course handicap added to par is your target score. So that's your, you know, if you play well, that's what you're going to shoot. So if you play better than that, you're playing better in your handicap. If you play worse than that, you're playing worse in your handicap. So I think that's important for people to understand when they're going out and playing around a golf. Hey, I'm a 17, par 70, 87 my target. So I'm trying to play better in 87 today. Playing handicap calculation is something new to 2020, and it refers to the competitive the handicap used in a competition, and that handicap allowance that we're applying to the golfers in the competition. And again, the example used below is the 4-ball stroke play competition using 85% of the course handicap. So that becomes your playing handicap. You know, there's the example of golfer with a handicap of 15. Playing handicap ends up being 13. So that's what, when we talk about the playing handicap, we're talking about the actual handicap being used in the competition. So this, back in 2020, 2021, as we started using this was something that was talked about a lot, because this was a change from the previous USGA handicap system. What that change is, when we're calculating a playing handicap for a competition, we're taking that 90%, which is used here in the example. We're actually taking 90% of the unrounded course handicap. So 4.6345513 that you see there, that is the unrounded course handicap. So that 90% is coming from that. And that's where we get 4. Previously, the course handicap would be rounded, and we take 90% of that, and that number may or may be different than what would result if we were using unrounded. Just depends on where that unrounded number is, and that happened a lot. It created a lot of questions with my Golf Genius users, because they were wondering how that was happening, and it was because the Golf Genius was doing it the right way. They were getting those percentages, 85, 90%, pulling that from an unrounded number. So that, I think we got everybody pretty much on the same page with that change, but it's good that this is in the book now, and it's good that we just review it and talk about it and just make it clear that when we're getting the playing handicap in our tournaments, that we're getting that from an unrounded course handicap. The final number, that number 4 there, is rounded. So that's the only time the rounding takes place, is on that final playing handicap number. So when multiple tees are in play, we don't need to make the adjustment like we used to make. If you remember, it was 3-5 in the USGA handicap system. So we don't do that anymore, because we have a par adjustment within the course handicap and playing handicap calculation. Now, if par is the same, there's no extra adjustment. Sometimes par does vary between tees, especially in a mixed event, where you will have, in many cases, a different par for men and women. So that difference in par is then taken into account in the mixed event. So you're taking handicaps, and then maybe you're making a 1 or 2 stroke adjustment up or down using that difference in par. So let's recap. Course handicap versus playing handicap. So a course handicap, again, is used for general recreational play. It determines your target score, and This is what's used to adjust your net double bogey so that, when you do blow up on a hole and you're taking net double bogey, which is double bogey, you're automatically adding 2 strokes on par, and then you're adding the number of strokes you receive. That number of strokes comes from your course handicap, not your playing handicap. Very important. That number of strokes come from your course handicap, not your playing handicap. And hint, I'm pretty sure that's going to be on your quiz later if you are taking a quiz. And a playing handicap is used for competition, just for the purpose of the competition. Questions?
Yep, Rich, we have one question. It was,
Great.
how does a league coordinator enter the scores for everyone in their group?
So really good question. So if you are representing one of our member clubs here today, we have a great program that we offer our clubs. It's great for leagues. It's Golf Genius. It's included in your service. So reach out to me if you want to use that. If you're currently using that, there's a great function in there that allows you to post scores for every player in the event, so long as you're using Golf Genius for your scoring. Then it will post those scores. If you're using like the mobile app, there's different ways to go about it through the mobile app. You can post scores for your group through the mobile app, so that there's a possibility there as well. So that's really, it's not a one-click kind of thing with the mobile app, but there is the ability to post scores for a league, an afternoon group kind of thing through the mobile app.
All right, yep, that's all the questions.
Okay, plugging away here. Section 4, committee actions. So let's talk about what kind of responsibilities, what the expectations are from a club handicap committee. First and foremost, the idea is to ensure that players at the club have a handicap that reflects their demonstrated ability, that equitability. We're looking to strengthen the equitability of the system by committee involvement, by being able to review member handicaps, review performance in club tournaments. And review is the key word. We have, and we're moving forward with some technology. There's a new handicap review capabilities reporting in the USGA admin portal. I'm going to be going over that next week at our USGA admin portal GIN webinar. But the committee needs to be involved, be ready to review the entire membership, and also review golfers, members that may be either performing well in events or have a situation, illness, some kind of thing, injury, and adjustments may need to transpire. So when adjusting a handicap index, the committee wants to consider all available evidence and then decide the appropriate course of action for any adjustment to a player's index. This can be resetting the handicap index by applying an adjustment to each of the 20 score differentials. So you see that -1 adjustment. We can freeze a handicap index at a level that the committee decides. Those are 2 good examples. Whether to apply any adjustments remains solely at the discretion of the handicap committee after taking into consideration any other knowledge the committee has relating to the player's demonstrated ability. Once the review is complete, the handicap committee can consider appropriate handicap index adjustment for the player. Any adjustment to a player's handicap index must be applied only after the player has been informed and has had an opportunity to respond to the handicap committee. So if we're going to make adjustments to your members, you need to, communicate what's going on. This is what the committee wants to do, and the golfer has to have an opportunity to explain their situation. The adjustment has to be a minimum of 1 stroke, upward or down, and can only increase a player's handicap index by up to 5 strokes above the player's low handicap index, unless there's exceptional circumstances. There's no, you can adjust as low as you want, but if you're going to increase a handicap index, the 5 cap is still in place. This is another great slide. If you have the ability to hit a screenshot, this is something that I think all your handicap committees should kind of look at in these situations. It's kind of it diagrams what, in real time, what all that you want to be thinking about in these situations when golfers fail to post. And so you want to figure out, what, if you can, figure out the reason why, either by asking a player or somehow, find out what's going on. Why is this player not posting, and then proceed accordingly. If there's a justification, then there's, you're fine. We don't have to take any action. Just ask the player, maybe the score shouldn't have been posted because they had 20 clubs in their bag and they're testing out drivers, or maybe he had somebody had a coach out with him, or the PGA professional was playing with him, helping. So okay, that understood. No need to post. When it's not justified, here are the options. Here are the options, and we can post a penalty score. We can post the actual score. If we have continued, again, that's probably what you want to do right away. And then if there's continued, if the behavior just doesn't change, then we want to consider a disciplinary action and maybe even possibly withdrawing the handicap index. The value of the penalty score applied to a player's scoring record should be appropriate for the circumstances and or the player's intent. For example, should intend to lower their handicap index equal to the score differential in their last 19 scores. Intended to raise their handicap index equal to the lowest differential in their last 19 scores. Again, if they continue to fail to submit scores, committee should consider withdrawing their handicap index or another form of action. So this is kind of what I was referring to in the last slide, just a policy, a process for, how the club and the committee are going to act towards failure to post scores. So we have a written warning as the first failure to post, a second failure is a penalty score, and then that third failure is where you might be withdrawing a handicap index. And some guidelines here in Rule 7-1 on withdrawing a handicap index. The player needs to be informed and have an opportunity to respond. So if you're going to go ahead with that action, just make sure you formally inform the player, give them an opportunity to explain their circumstances, and then proceed. The player needs, you do need to provide the player with the length of time their handicap index will be withdrawn and any other conditions that are going to be involved. Reinstatement. So when the handicap is ready to be reinstated, there's some guidelines, where you can, basically make a committee adjustment start them off where should this golfer be? So you determine that, and then that's their handicap index to start. You can start the player new, or you can reinstate them to their last recorded index. And again, the good opportunities when we have these circumstances. There's not a lot of them, which is good. And please feel free to reach out to me on this. And it's helpful. It's helpful. One, I've had a lot of experience dealing with different clubs. I can share those experiences. Two, for your, it's a good exercise just to talk through the options and get comfortable with what types of actions are available, and it'll help you help with your communication to whoever is being impacted, and it helps get you to a point where you're setting a nice precedent that everybody kind of gets this precedent here, like the three kind of steps, 3 stages. It's good to kind of set those precedents, follow through on those precedents, and it creates a clear understanding of what the expectations are. So moving on to competition. So committee in charge of a competition can set a maximum handicap index, can set a maximum course handicap, set a maximum play in handicaps, can reserve the right to adjust a play in handicap before or between rounds of a competition. We talked about the multi-round competition. So those conditions are important. They should be printed on your information forms. If I missed something here, I might have skipped ahead. No, we're good. Any questions on committee responsibilities and whether club oversight or tournament oversight?
Yep, Rich, we got one. So it's if a player continually posts scores several days late, but then posts a score, should this result in a penalty score being used to override the score posted?
That's a really great question, and I want to thank whoever asked the question. That's a perfect question. So that's something that happens a lot, right? You have golfers that just they're just late in posting those scores. So I think it depends on. Listen, we want those scores right away. That's a pattern of behavior that's not good for the club, for equitability. It affects playing condition calculations. It affects peer review. So I see that it's not as bad as just blatantly not posting, but it is a concern. And I think the committee can follow the same guidelines. I think there's a written warning is I'd be very comfortable with a written warning to the golfer, an email. Hey, we noticed you're always 3-4 days behind posting. We really need those scores going right away for these reasons. And again, if it just continues to be an issue, then maybe there's a penalty score after that, and then hopefully in this kind of situation, the scores are being posted. It changes behavior. We don't get to a point where we're even talking about withdrawing a handicap index or modifying a handicap index, freezing it. But just depends on the circumstance. Is there manipulation going on with the golfer that isn't posting the scores? Is there a pattern where they're playing rounds? Is it multiple scores? Are they playing 2-3 rounds in a week and they're not posting it until 2-3 days after? So I think you want to look at the situation, get all the information you can, and then go from there. But I think the guidelines in place kind of give you the tools to address that kind of circumstance. Definitely. Great question. Anything else, Walt? Okay, let's move on to the appendices. We talked about allowances, and you see the big red banner change for 2024. So some good stuff here. So there are some changes in the recommendations. So take a look at this. Great screenshot. Again, Penny's C. So you can always reference it there. But you see a scramble adjustment for 3 players. That's new. Match play 4 ball, 90%. That's new. Impact of field size. So this is important to keep in mind. This is a great change because it really makes a lot of sense. So there's 3 things to keep in mind with regard to field size. The recommended handicap index allowance is 95% for all individual stroke play formats. This is based on medium field size net events, which is a field between 30 and 100 players. The 95% field between 30 and 100 players. If the field is less than 30, the recommendation is 100%. So less than 30 golfers, we're talking 100%. In addition to that, you want to look at, the skill level of your field. And if there's a significant percentage of higher handicappers in the field, a lower allowance should be considered. So if there's a lot of high handicappers, and you can see that, there's a recommendation here to, further reduce the playing handicaps by 90% instead of 95%. And this chart is in the appendix. Great screenshot right here if you can do that. But this kind of gives you those guidelines to when you might want to make that adjustment or keep it the same. Very helpful. So this slide refers to to a match play scenario. This has changed a little bit, and it makes a lot of sense. In general, handicap allowances have been applied in match play formats. The player with the lowest playing handicap plays off 0 strokes relative to the other players. The other player receives a difference between their own playing handicap and that of the player with the lowest playing handicap. So here we have the unrounded difference. We have a plus handicap in the mix. We have that 90%. So what are we talking about here? So basically we're not taking 90% of the course handicap and then adjusting and then playing golf. We're taking the adjustments, right? The strokes that I'm going to be getting off of player A, if I'm player B, which is rounded to ends up being 14.8 rounds to 15. And that's what I'm playing off. So the adjusted handicap is what is getting the 90% rather than the adjusted handicap I'm playing off rather than just the handicap out of the start. So it does change things a little bit, and it makes more sense. So just note whether it's a plus handicap or a regular handicap index, the percentages are used to move the plus closer to 0, and obviously a regular handicap and non-plus handicap closer to 0. So in both cases, the percentaging, the allowance will move that golfer's handicap closer to 0. So we've mentioned handicap review, committee review tools in an earlier slide. There is now going to be reporting within the admin portal to help the handicap committee conduct their reviews, which is very important. You want to do this at least once a year. A consistent approach. Communicate to your membership that reviews are taking place, and you want to take advantage of the technology that you have. Some clubs have incorporated Cap Patrol, which is it does help identify golfers who are performing well in your tournaments. So that is part of the review. The review tools in place now are going to be, again, it's in the report, in the reports of your USGA admin portal. And we're going to be looking at the equations used to determine players' expected score based on a mean and standard deviation. Players can have good and bad days. The tolerance for applying a flag is set at a level which allows for a normal amount of variance, and the frequency of play is also taken into consideration. So step one on this report, this will produce a list of players. So access and report is key. And you're going to get a list of players who are flagged for a handicap index adjustment, increase or decrease as recommended by the rules of handicapping. The handicap review report will automatically be generated each month, but a golf club can also run the report as needed. Step two is to review the flagged player for a handicap index adjustment, including additional handicap data and information about the player, as well as using the committee's knowledge of the player, using information such as when a player last played to their handicap index and comparing general play against competition. These are examples of additional handicap data available for each player. The handicap review report will provide this information, but you can use any information you have to support whether a player's handicap index reflects their demonstrated ability or not. So if you want to use Cap Patrol, if you want to just go into a golfer's score history and filter it by competition scores and non-competition scores, weekday scores versus non-weekend scores, to figure out, when this golfer plays great and when they don't play so great. So winning and replacing in a competition doesn't always mean someone played better than a handicap index, nor is it a sole reason to adjust a handicap index, as it's possible to win or place high simply by playing one's handicap. And that's true. That certainly we've seen that. That golfers just play their handicap, they're successful under that. How one finished in the competition should not be used for making the adjustment to a player's handicap index, but instead an inspection of the scores for the competition against their scoring record. So we want to look at those scores and compare it to the regular scores. How do they match up? All right, so now we have our information, and we want to move forward. How do we go about this? So we want you to use the knowledge and your discretion. This is why this is a committee decision. You have the, with regard to your membership, that's part of the review. The peer review is that you have a better understanding of the player and a pattern, and whether there's a pattern of behavior or not. If the committee decides to adjust the handicap index, the player must be informed and provided with an opportunity to appeal the decision. So that goes back to, that's consistent with everything with the committee. Whenever there's an adjustment that is either going to be taking place to a golfer that's a member, they should be informed and have the opportunity to make that appeal. The tool will provide the ability to make the adjustment or not, or to look at greater detail that provides more information about the player. All right, so the tool is going to be helpful. It's going to help you flag players where there is a concern, players that may not have been on your radar, that should have been on your radar, or it's going to reinforce maybe concerns that were already there. And then there's this automated function of your calculation service providing you that report, telling you that there is a downward adjustment that is recommended. according to the information where that is in their scoring history. So it should be very helpful. Looking forward to going over that report next week at the USGA admin portal gin session. Same time, 10 o'clock next week. But it should be very helpful in addition to some of the other tools that are out there. So this is just some more information on how that review is done, how the recommendations are show up in your report. So for 3 or more flag differentials in the scoring history of 1 to 14 scores, adjustment is recommended. 4 or more between a 15 and 33 scores. 5 or more as we get a little higher. 6 or more when we have 56 plus scores. So you're going to see flags next to scores on this report. And for downward, so that was upward adjustment, and this is for downward adjustment. And again, Appendix D to reference this. So if we do go forward with the adjustment again, there's some language here. It talks about an adjustment of 1.0 upward or downward. And it's really the same process as the other recommendations for adjustments. Another great slide here. Great screenshot for handicap committee members. As to what you want to be considering when looking at these, when doing a handicap review. And I'm gonna just kind of move through these slides because we are getting to a point where we're beyond the hour and a half that's allocated. But again, you see that -1 adjustment that impacts all the scores, and then as the golfer plays, his regular scores get, there's no adjustment to him. He has an opportunity to kind of just play and have the handicap move to more traditional way. Stroke index allocation. This is a service that we provide at New Jersey State through our course rating. We will give you a recommendation for stroke index allocation. We use a method called the triad method, and basically puts the 1, 3, and 5 stroke holes in the middle, front and back 3-hole triads. We like to spread the strokes out as best we can. And again, I think the most important aspect of this to take away is we're trying to create a match dynamic that suits your club, suits your competitions, suits your match plays, your regular match play. And sometimes, even though, certain holes may be obviously, the hardest holes, that kind of thing, you may not want them being one after the other after another in a match, which is why we like to spread them out, odds and evens, which is why the triad method works great, and spreading out those top stroke holes, those 1, 3, 5, 2, 4, 6 stroke holes. And then I think you do your best with that. What I always tell clubs, you do your best with that. You do your best to make sure it makes the most sense to your membership. And at the end of the day, you've done what you needed to do to create that equitability, that match dynamic. Try not to get too hung up on this is also what I recommend. As long as you have a good match dynamic in place, as long as it makes sense to your membership, you're in good shape. Establishing par. Listen, this is we consistency has been a big push We want all of your tees to kind of have the same par, even though they may not totally line up with regard to the recommendations for par. We understand that you're going to have a more forward set of tees for men, for golfers that just can't play the course as long as it is from the member tee. But we want to maintain the same par values, even though those holes may not be within these guidelines. We just want to be consistent. So just keep that in mind. Definitely use this as a reference, but always keep that in mind as well, that we weigh more on consistency within tees than actually sticking to these guidelines. Lastly, just course rating system is the backbone of all of this. Again, our ability to measure the difficulty of courses, to provide to put a numerical value to a course for a scratch golfer, for a bogey golfer, is why we can have handicap index, why we can post scores and create these averages and create this equitability across the entire world. With the World Handicap System, with everybody using this, we have that equitability throughout. As long as they're sticking, when they're rating courses, they're using a course rating system, we're going to have equitability. Some definitions here. Just again, course rating is scratch player. Scratch player is defined as a 0.0 handicap index. Bogey rating is a bogey player with approximately 20.0, 24 for men, 24.0 for women. The slope is that relative difficulty of par between relative difficulty of a course between a bogey, between a scratch and a bogey player. Here are some examples. And the last thing we'll leave you with is we're very excited about this. We're now able to rate shorter courses, and you're able to, you as golfers are able to now post scores at shorter par 3 courses that you've never been able to post to before. We're on a, this year is a big initiative for us, is to rate as many par 3 courses in the state as we can. It's about 20 or so courses in the state that fit this category that we're going to try to rate this year. And we're excited. I think it's an opportunity to get younger golfers, beginner golfers that are starting off on shorter courses, to maybe get interested in tracking their game using the handicap system, getting an NJSJ membership so they can get access to the mobile app, start posting scores, and they can track their skill using the statistics, and obviously the handicap index. So we're very excited about it. So 750 yards is now the new standard for 9-hole courses that can receive a course and slope rating. Questions?
Yep, Rich, we got a few. One is a quick one. Can we take the test later tonight?
Yeah, so with regard to this, you can take it anytime. So those of you that are representing a club on this webinar, I'm going to email you the link to the test, and you'll have that link. If you want to start it today and finish it next week, you can do that. You have that option. So there's no timetable on taking the test.
And then if the league coordinator posts the scores for players, can we exclude the scores from all other courses and just use the scores posted on our course for a more accurate score for just our course?
So that's a no. For a handicap index to be a handicap index, we have to accept all scores from all courses that have a course and slope rating. So that kind of works against the purpose of the handicap system. I do understand what the concern is for that league, and it's not the first time I've received that question. The league is looking for a handicap that's more focused on the play during their league play. So you can adjust your league handicaps, and you can, as a committee, you can make adjustments according to league performance. if you think that's going to make your league events more equitable. But right now, there's no way of separating, a league handicap from the regular handicap index, or vice versa. But good question. That's it. Get that question a lot.
And then final one, can two people from the same golf club be dedicated admin users?
Yes, no problem. We can have multiple admins, and encourage it. It's the more, it should help your workload, or responsibility load. So we definitely encourage having multiple admins with the admin portal and Golf Genius. Great questions. Thank you. Thank you all for sitting in on this meeting today. This is really important information. My first presentation of the year, so I appreciate your patience and me kind of getting used to presenting the new World Handicap System and the revisions, and getting comfortable with educating you all on it. Glad you can do this. Always feel like you can reach out to myself with regard to any questions, consultations, anything you need to gain a better understanding for you, so you can communicate that understanding to your members. That's part of why I'm here. So moving on to the quiz and certification. So this education requirement is very important. It has to be. We're giving you till June, giving clubs till June 1st to fulfill this, which is doing what you're doing now, attending a webinar or a seminar on the World Handicap System rules of handicapping, and then taking the club certification quiz. So what are the next steps? So for clubs, so if you're representing a club here today, you're going to wait for an email from me with a dedicated club quiz link. Have fun with this. Take your time. Research your answers. On the email is going to be a link to the rules of handicapping. Use your notes from the webinar. Work together if you can. If you're at the club today, work together on this, and have fun doing that. Or if you can jump on a call, like a screen share, like we're doing now, like maybe have some people, involved, get more people involved. That's totally fine. Get an 80 or better. If you do that, the requirement is fulfilled. If you don't do it, you're just going to have to take it again. It's a new process, but we'll be basically re-emailing you a link for you to take the quiz. Make note of the answers that you got wrong. So when you submit it, you're going to see the answers you got wrong. Make note of that. And, the following week, when you get the new quiz link, jump in there and you'll get 100. But take your time with the quiz. You can go backwards on the quiz. Don't feel like after you answer a question to move on, you can't go back to it, because it may hit you when you're looking up something else. You may run into something that says, "Oh wow, I got to look at the answer I put in. It may not have been right." So do that. If you're just a member jumping in on this webinar, just for just so you can learn more about the handicap system, it's great. I'm going to email you as well with a 15-question quiz link, and have fun with it. Take your time, obviously. Lastly, if you just jumped on this call and you didn't register through our website, that's fine. But send me, you can either enter your name right now in the comments, or send me an email. I have to send you the quiz link, the club quiz link. It's not like it used to be, where we had like one quiz link and you just entered your club information and you went in and took the quiz. It does have to be this dedicated link for you to take, and it's only one link per club. So you can't have multiple people taking the quiz, but you can work together on it. You can work together on it, but you can't have 5 separate people taking the quiz. anymore. So hopefully that's clear. I know it's different. It's a lot, but it should. Yeah, hopefully that goes well. So give me some time to just a few minutes. I want to send you guys the quiz links, and then just email me, reach out to me, call me if you have any questions about this. Anytime, really. That's it. Any more questions? Anything pop up as we're concluding there?
No other questions, Rich.
All right. Well, once again, thank you. Thank you all. It's going to be a great season. Weather's off to a good start, and some really, really nice changes to the World Handicap System rules of handicapping. I think once we get used to the expected score concept, it's gonna be some educating on that early. Well, once golfers get used to it, I think they're gonna love it. I think they're really gonna enjoy the way in which those 9-hole scores or those 12-hole rounds impact their handicap index. Okay, thank you again, and have a great day, and look for an email from me shortly.